Everyone for joining us. We're just waiting for a few more seconds just to make sure that everyone from the waiting room are let in, and then we can go ahead and get started. I'll wait the awkward 10 seconds before we get started. Okay, great. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone, today. I'm so pleased to have Michael V. Jenkins here with us today to talk about future-proof leadership. Michael has worked with UCLA Health for over 10 years and is currently the manager of IT risk operations for the UCLA Health Sciences enterprise. He holds a Ph.D. and an MBA. Michael is a seasoned leadership consultant and a frequent speaker at regional, state, and national conferences. Michael, we are so happy to have you here today, and I will let you take it away.
All right. Thank you, Grace, and thanks for having me. Good afternoon to everyone. We are going to be talking about what is a very near and dear topic to my heart, and that is future-proof leadership. And what future-proof leadership does is it looks backward at least 100 years, and it looks for principles that were true in good leadership then, that are still true now and will still be true 100 years from now. And so we're going to get right into it. We'll start with the necessity of leadership. Why does it matter? Why do we need to have leadership in the first place? A gentleman by the name of Bennis wrote a book, and he talked about the necessity of leadership. And I've used Gilligan's Island to present his idea in a simplistic way. And the first is, if you drop Gilligan on an island all by himself, he doesn't need a leader. Most people are generally well-managed, they're self-managed, they can handle things all on their own. I don't think Gilligan would make it off that island if he was there by himself. But if you put Gilligan on the island, he doesn't generally need help to self-manage. But if you add the skipper, Gilligan and the skipper have to agree on everything, not most things, not some things, but on everything, if they're going to exist on that island together without a leader. But when you add the professor, if Thurston and Lovey come, if Ginger and Marianne join the 15-year and 3-hour tour, you've got to have a leader. So anytime you have a group of at least 2 people, if there is not complete and total agreement, or if you have more than 2 people, Bennis says you have to have a leader every time without exception. And so that brings us to the purpose of today's conversation. And so what I'd like for us to do together first, before we really get into this, is to try to build a new leadership paradigm together. A fellow by the name of Jim Collins wrote a book called Good to Great. And in his book, he talks about the importance of getting the right people on the bus. Because if you have the wrong people on the bus and the bus breaks down, you're going to be stuck. And so what I'd like for you to do now is go into the chat, and I'd like you to drop examples of leadership traits that you think are important for a future-proof leader. Take a moment and do that. We're answering that bottom question. What does a future-proof leader look like for your organization? Open-minded, adaptable, flexible, active listening skills, transparent, empathy, fairness, good, ability to listen, very good, flexible, knowing clearly the difference between listening and hearing, yes, authentic, supportive, emotionally intelligent, compassion, communication skills, empathetic, compassionate, listening, feedback, direction, proactive, effective negotiation skills, good communication skills, integrity, honesty, anticipatory, decisive, clear, constructive feedback, respectful, the ability to delegate and listen, resilience, keep them coming, understands the big picture, self-awareness, courage, servant leader, Give you a few more minutes. Come on, drop them in the chat. Don't give up. Accountability, service-minded, passion, treats everyone equal. Yes, respectful, humility, visionary, transparent, unbiased, absolutely, self-aware, forward-thinking. I'll have you guys know this is my favorite part of the whole presentation, by the way. No, I'm serious, Arf. Emotionally intelligent. That's the second time I've seen emotionally intelligent in those words. I've seen it in lots of different ways described, but that's the second time I've seen those actual words. Anyone else? Good sense of humor, good balance. Own up to mistakes made, absolutely. Don't worry, I'm not in a rush. I don't have a lot of slides here, folks. Few more minutes. 60 seconds. Anything else? These are all fantastic answers, by the way. I haven't seen a bad one yet. Be inspirational. Absolutely. All right. So here's the challenge. People are getting promoted based on their competence or technical skills, but that does not translate to good leadership. They're really good at their job. And so we make them managers, or we make them supervisors or directors, and we promote them because they were great technical leads, or they were really competent in their job, but that does not translate into good leadership. So here they are. For those of you that thought we would wait all day to get to them and I'd give you the big bang at the end, here it is, slide number 5. Ta-da! These are the 3 virtues that every future focused leader has to have. The first one is humility. The second one is hunger. And the third one is people smarts. I said it a moment ago, I saw emotional intelligence twice by that name in the list and then described in many different ways. That is people smarts. That is emotional intelligence. Absolutely. Hunger was on your list. Absolutely was. Humility by that name was on the list, but it was also described in other ways, several times on the list. These 3 things are deceptively simple, but they have driven good organizations for over 100 years. They're driving good organizations today. They'll still be driving good organizations tomorrow. I'm going to spend more time on number 1 than I spend on 2 and 3, but please do not interpret that to mean that they're not all equally important. All right? Number 1, that is humility, the lack of excessive ego. That is my definition that I'd like to use with you today to describe humility. And humble leaders are the kind of people that share credit. They are not concerned with patting themselves on the back. They're not concerned with the spotlight. They share credit. They understand that whatever we accomplish together. They emphasize service over themselves, and they define success collectively rather than individually. C.S. Lewis said, humility isn't thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. But the most important part for me of humility, and there is research around this, and all the way at the end of the slides, if you get a copy of the slides, all the way at the end, there are references here for the material used in this presentation. There's another slide that has additional reading for people that like what they get today in this presentation and they want to read more. The most important part of humble leadership, because that's an actual leadership domain, like servant leadership, humble leadership is another one, is there's really good research around pairing humble leadership with psychological safety. Psychological safety is the leader's responsibility to create an environment where it's okay for you to make mistakes. We actually learn through making mistakes. And a lot of times people will hide mistakes. They'll do everything to keep their mistakes from being found out because they're concerned about what's going to happen because they made a mistake. And so humble leaders have to pair psychological safety with everything they do to ensure that the people who report to them, the people being coached and mentored by them, understand that the world is not going to end because they made a mistake. An honest mistake, to be clear. All right. Poor leaders lack humility and tolerate inflated egos in others. By a show of hands, for those of you on camera, how many of you know leaders that lack humility and tolerate inflated egos in other people? Absolutely. Happens every day. They promote self-centered people, and they fail to confront the ego in others. That is probably the one for me that is most annoying out of them all, is even sometimes when you have leaders that are humble, they won't confront other people who are not. But part of the leadership responsibility is to ensure that not only you are doing these things, but that the other people that you're building as leaders and the people on your teams are also demonstrating humility in the way that they interact and engage with other people. So the lack of humility shows up in two different ways. The first is kind of obvious, the second one, not so much. You have people who make everything about themselves. They love to brag about what they've accomplished, and they love to soak up all the attention as if they don't work on a team and nobody else ever contributed anything to the success of that team. You know that's not true. I know that's not true, but these people are overtly arrogant. And what they do is they are the people who generate office politics. They sow division, they sow resentment among the team because they make everything about themselves. And they suck up the air in a room so that the other people who contributed to the success of whatever the team did feel like their contributions don't matter. Again, that problem is horrible when your own leader is doing it to you, but it's just as bad when they refuse to check it in other people. The second one is not as obvious as the first, because typically a lack of self-confidence is harmless to most people. They don't see it as a problem. However, these people, by discounting their own talents and contributions, by devaluing their own worth, violates the spirit of humility itself in the first place. Because this is the person who has great ideas but will not advocate for their own ideas. They will not speak up about positive opportunities that could help the organization. And because they're not doing that, they end up hurting the organization. Now, what underlies both of these issues is actually insecurity. Insecurity is what makes people project and overcompensate for their own accomplishments by discounting the accomplishments of other people. And both of these types create an equally alarming problem for the organization because they both diminish performance. Are there any questions at all around the concept of humility? Any questions, any feedback, horror stories around the concept of humility?
Michael, I really like the comment on the frustration between when humble leaders refuse to or don't have the ability to stand up, I suppose, for lack of a better term, to unhumble leaders. Do you have any strategies or with that conflict? Because it happens all the time. So
absolutely. They are in the presentation, and I promise you we're going to get into how to build humility. And thank you for that feedback. Anyone else? How should you best confront a leader, or how should a leader confront a member of their team who's displaying ego traits? Thank you for that, Rachel. I promise you it's in the presentation, and I'm going to answer that question. You are welcome. All right, the second one. Remember, I spent more time on number one than I will on 2 or 3. That's intentional, largely because of that second point, which is the lack of self-confidence. So you need to break out humility and really help people understand that it's not just people walking around with their chin in the air and pretending like they do no wrong and everything they do is great. It's also addressing the people who don't speak up and who don't bring opportunities to light to make the organization better. All right, hunger is speaking about the commitment to go above and beyond. These are the kind of people that you do not have to push to work harder. You do not have to push them to do more, and their performance is sustained. We're not talking about people who you can throw a project at and they do really well at it, and then they need 6 months to recover afterwards. That's not a hungry person, because that person is performing to meet a particular goal. Hungry people are the kind of people who sustain that performance all year long. They are self-motivated. They are diligent. They're always thinking about the next step. They're asking for more. They're coming to you and saying, hey, I finished everything I was supposed to do. What else do you need me to do? How else can I help? Is there anything I can take off of your plate? Those are the kinds of people that we need to be developing in the organization, because unproductive and dispassionate people always stand out. But hungry people are often overlooked and go unrewarded. I am positive, absolutely positive, that there are hungry people on this call who work hard every day, who don't let up, and they are not being acknowledged and rewarded for their hard work. It happens every day. But good leaders find hungry people and reward them. These are the kind of people that you want to pour yourself into, because it's easy to project hunger to get promoted or to be recognized, but they cannot sustain that type of hunger if they're not truly hungry. Anybody ever gone to a buffet and you were already full? Like, what a waste of a buffet. You got like half a plate of food. It doesn't even make sense. That's the concept behind hungry people. They cannot sustain the hunger. There's no point in going to the buffet if you're not going to eat. And there are people who come to work every day and they're not hungry, and they don't put in 100%. They don't put in 50%. But good leaders themselves are hungry. They're not just hungry to delegate and then sit back and watch everyone else work. They're hungry to make the commitment to go above and beyond. They go both up and down the organization. They don't just go to their own manager and say, what else could I be doing? They go to their teams and say, what do you need from me? How can I support you? How can I help you? Is there something in your way that you need me to move? Instead of just waiting on everyone to come to them passively and hoping that some work comes their way while they goof off. That's not a hungry leader. The last one are smart people. These are people who are interpersonally appropriate. This is not intellectual capacity, as you all did a fantastic job with this, as you all identified in your attributes that you put in the chat. Emotional intelligence came up lots and lots of different ways, but smart people ask questions. They listen to others instead of always doing the talking, and they actively engage in conversations. They handle people very well. I'm positive that you know people who are not egocentric. They're not walking around with their chin in the air, pretending like the whole world revolves around them. They work hard, but they're terrible with people. They are absolutely horrible in how they handle people. Interpersonally appropriate people, however, have good judgment, and they have intuition around the subtleties of group dynamics. Listen, this does not come naturally. EQ takes effort, and it grows over time. You don't wake up in the morning one day like the Tom Hanks movie Big. You don't wake up one day big. You don't wake up one day and be emotionally intelligent. It doesn't work that way. You have to learn people. You have to know people. You have to watch people, observe people, talk to people, and then learn how to engage people appropriately in order to be emotionally intelligent. But when you have all three of those things, you have become what I have phrased to be a future-proof leader. Now, here's the dangerous part. People are being promoted into leadership roles that do not have all three qualities. By show of hands, how many of you know people that are in leadership roles that are not humble, that are not hungry, and are not also smart? Yeah. For those of you not paying attention, lots of hands went up, both on camera and in the reactions. Some applause there. I'll take it all. It takes an enormous amount of effort and time to develop the capacity for all three. I mean, for you as a leader to try to develop it in someone else, it takes an enormous amount of effort, takes an enormous amount of time. So you have to move slowly. You have to coach often. Over the next several slides, we're going to identify the gaps that happen when people are not all three of these things. And it's going to help you see not just up, but also down and to the sides. It's going to help you see where these gaps are in other people. My hope in that is not just to point out where the warts are, but to help you build a plan to grow leaders around you. So for those of you asking, how do you deal with a person who's not humble? How do you address it? Trust me, it's in the slides. We're going to talk about it. And that's where the real discussion of today comes in. So we're going to be there in just a moment. Just hold tight. But we need to have an honest moment first and acknowledge that some of these people have already slipped through the cracks. There are absolutely people, as we saw just a moment ago through your raised hands, through your feedback, there are absolutely people who are not humble, who are not hungry, or who are not smart, or some combination of the three that have already moved into leadership. And so we need to be able to identify those gaps, address those gaps, and then put a plan in place to help them be better. People who don't want to be better, I have an opinion about how they should be handled, but I'll save that for another day. We'll focus on being better. All right, here we go. Now we're into dangerous territory. When you have a person who is only humble, they become or are a pawn. They're pleasant, but they have no ambition and they cannot build relationships. And so these people thrive in environments where everybody values harmony. Everybody just wants to get along, but they don't care about the work getting done. As long as everybody gets along, this person is fine. They actually thrive. And this is why you see people who sit in organizations for 20, 30, 40 years who produce nothing, but they're not going anywhere. Because if they're humble and nobody demands anything of them, they'll thrive. That's true for a manager who writes performance evaluations and never gives negative feedback to people who need it, who just marks everybody as meet standards and does not give honest feedback, because what you end up with is people who have no idea that they need to perform. And as long as everybody gets along, they're perfectly fine. Then you have the bulldozer, the person who's only hungry. They get things done, but if you leave them unchecked, they'll tear up the entire organization because they don't know how to handle people and they have no humility. Smart people are charmers. Everybody likes them, but they don't care about the long-term health of the organization. They survive because they connect with people, but they don't produce anything. And who wants to go beat up their friend and tell them they're doing a horrible job? Such a nice guy. I can't do that to him. You have to. You have to give that feedback. You have to be honest with people. So when you have people that are only one of those three attributes, the key to all of those are they either don't produce anything or they tear everything up. And we cannot afford, as an organization that has a research and educational mission, a healthcare mission, to allow people to produce nothing, or to tear up the environment. Can't do it. However, two are better than one. But it's harder to identify people who are only two. Because a lot of leadership is situational. If a person is really good at their job and they're really hungry and they're humble, but they don't know how to handle people, their limitation only shows up when they're forced to deal with people-y stuff. And so if everything around them is okay and there are no problems, they might go for a very long time unchecked or even undetected. However, people who only have two pieces of this are usually great as second chairs or interim leaders. So it's not to suggest that you can't use them for anything, but they're not ready to be a primary leader yet. This is the person you leave on your out of office notification to handle things while you're out for a week. But you don't want to trust them to lead the team forever. So if you have a person who is humble and hungry, but not smart, they are the proverbial Steve Urkel. They are the accidental mess maker. For those of you that heard Steve in the back of your mind saying, did I do that? That's exactly who this person is. They want to lead. They're uninterested in the credit, but they can't handle people. And you will absolutely be cleaning up their messes regularly, routinely. There's no way around it. If they don't know how to handle people, you will have to intervene for these people. So for those of you asking, how do you deal with a person who has horrible EQ and does not know how to handle people? CORE has really good training for EQ. I've taken it, and I can tell you it helped me personally. There you go. For those of you wondering if I've mastered all these things that I'm talking about, absolutely not. The EQ training at CORE helped me tremendously to build my EQ. I highly recommend it for any of you that just want to increase and build your EQ. Is there anybody else on the call that's taken that training? Yeah, there's some folks in the chat saying it's great, some raised hands. Absolutely. The EQ training is wonderful at CORE. LinkedIn Learning also has a lot of really good material on the subject of EQ. Siobhan says there's one from SFCC. I don't know what SFCC is. Siobhan, can you tell us what that is? Can you be more specific? But I highly recommend that any of you, all of you, no matter how great you are at your EQ, be consistently doing things to increase your EQ, because you can never be too good at handling people. You can never be too good at helping people navigate all of the various things that happen in this environment. The next thing that I would suggest for you, if you are or you have people who need to get smarter, is to be upfront with offending staff and about the impact, rather, of their behavior. You cannot avoid it. There are people who every time they unmute on a call, people start to cringe because they don't know what the person's going to say. Anyone ever seen that? I learned when I took the EQ training from CORE that when I get triggered, I start like rubbing my face and I put my hands in my face and I start playing with my face. And it's like a tell for me. And so people who know me know when they see me start doing that, that something bad is going on in a room, and they'll stop and be like, hey, what's going on? What just happened? We didn't realize it, but something just happened. People have tells. They absolutely do. And a lot of times, because as leaders, we're on the outside looking in, hopefully, and we're not the ones doing the offending behavior, we have to be willing to be upfront with people, to pull them aside and tell them, hey, when we have these calls together as a group and you make statements like this, it has the ability to impact other people negatively. I had a situation recently where a member of my staff, they did absolutely nothing wrong, to be clear. I'm not suggesting that they did something wrong, but I got an escalation from another manager about a conversation that happened during a call. And when I got the feedback and I went back and talked to the person, they told me what they actually said. My response to them was, Well, do you see how the person on the other end could interpret what you said to mean what they thought you said? And their immediate response was, absolutely. I didn't mean it that way. That's not at all what I was talking about. I was just saying this. But you have to create regular coaching sessions with people, provide feedback to people, and help them understand that the things that they say, the way that they say it, the way that they engage and interact with other people has an impact on the person on the other end. And 9 times out of 10, it has nothing to do with what you said or even what you intended. Communication is about what the receiver gets on the other end. And so if you're not communicating clearly with the person on the other end, it makes it difficult for you to even get feedback about your EQ. So for every leader, I highly recommend that you build time into your regular coaching sessions to discuss that person's EQ. Whether the feedback is positive, negative, or neutral, to create a line item on your one-on-ones to talk to people about their EQ, how other people receive and perceive their engagement with that person. All right. Oh, actually, are there any questions around this? Perfect. All right. Number 2 is the lovable slacker. This is the person who is humble and smart, but they're not hungry. They don't care about undeserved attention. They do care about others, but they don't have any passion. But you hate to confront them because they're lovable. But you have to. You cannot promote Peter Gibbons. You can't do it, for those of you who've ever seen Office Space. You can't promote this guy. He's lovable, but he doesn't even want to work there anymore. And somehow he got promoted. So how do we help people find an appetite? This time I can be even more specific. CORE has a course called Engagement Magic. CORE also has a course called Getting Things Done. Getting Things Done, I absolutely loved it. I actually scheduled for our entire team, including the folks who report up to my senior manager. We all did Getting Things Done together. We took like several hours out of the workday, a couple days a week, and we met with the trainers from CORE. They will absolutely do it for your own teams. And we all did Getting Things Done together. And what that did for us was it helped us all speak the same language about what we were trying to communicate. So if there was something, thanks, Junaid. Junaid's on the call. He was part of the team. He took the course. So if my senior manager wants me to do something right now, he'll just say GTD. And I know immediately what he's saying, like, don't put it off, take care of it. It'll only take 2 minutes. Knock it out right now. We have calls where we'll actually have everybody open, hey, open that up, do that, change that, do it right now. And then we get so much more accomplished than waiting for people to go back and do it later. And you can do that. Thanks, Jordan. Jordan was in the training too. You can do that in your staff meetings. You can do that in your stand-up meetings, in your huddles. The getting things done part, not the training, but applying it. There are lots of different ways to apply that when you meet and when you have interaction and engagement with your teams. The second one is a little more difficult, but it's about aligning the person's hunger with the organizational mission. It's very difficult to be lazy when you're really bought into a mission. Conversely, it's very easy to be lazy if the only reason you're here is to get a check. If you don't care about the mission of the organization, you're going to lack passion about your work because your work doesn't have meaning to you. So as a leader, you've got to find ways to align that person's hunger with the mission of the organization and to help them find meaning in their work. Why am I here? Why am I doing this? Why does it matter? Because if it doesn't matter, I can goof off. I can go play my Nintendo Switch all day while other people are working, and I can put in an hour worth of work and then go to brunch. And as long as I've got my cell phone and my Teams is on, or I got my laptop and my cell phone so I can use it as a hotspot. If somebody needs me, they can find me, but I'm not really going to do much else for the rest of the day. You've got to help them find meaning in their work. The last thing that I would say about the lovable slacker is you've got to check for burnout. What's going on with that person? Are they feeling overwhelmed? Are they tired when they come to work? Because they're not energized by the work, because they don't have any meaning in their work. They've started to burn out. I took a class and then I get information from Harvard Business Review, and there was this whole thing about how to do an evaluation on burnout on your team. And what I discovered is a very, very interesting thing to me. I had been praising a member of my team for something that they did very well, but it was actually the thing that was giving them the most anxiety about their work. In my mind, they were doing great at this particular thing. But I'm telling you, I'm not kidding. That one thing, I'm not saying they were only doing one thing well. I'm saying the one thing that I distinctly recall consistently saying both up to my management and laterally to that person that they were doing great at, praising them publicly over, was the thing that was keeping them up at night. So you cannot assume that your people are not exhausted, that they're not burned out, and you will find burnout in the most interesting tasks, in the most interesting ways. And if you're interested in that material about burnout, please reach out to me. It's an actual evaluation that you can do with your team. It's got a matrix and all that. And it helps you not just assess their burnout, but it helps you address their burnout. Any feedback, questions about that? There's only 2 more slides. All right. The last of the, they've got 2 but not 3, is the skillful politician. If you've ever seen the movie Wag the Dog is not about a dog wagging its tail. It's about picking up the whole dog and wagging the whole dog. And that's exactly what they did in the movie. They created a fake war to get the president out of trouble because of something he did wrong. They created a whole war. They created a war hero who was a homeless guy that they pulled off the street and made him a fake war hero. And they had this whole Hollywood production just to get the attention off the president because he had done something wrong. Very good movie. But these are the people who are hungry, they're smart, but they're not humble. They work hard, they're ambitious if it's going to benefit them. They fake humility well, but they'll leave a trail of destruction that you can't even identify until it's too late. Because they're really good at their job, they take on extra work, they're perfectly fine with volunteering to do more work. They raise their hand every time you look for a volunteer. But there's so much that comes along with stoking their ego that it's not even worth it. Because they're skillful. And most of us can immediately name one that we worked with before. I'm not asking you to do that in the chat. Please don't do that in the chat. I'm saying in your mind. Somebody comes to mind, inevitably, who is skillful, and you sit back and just scratch your head and say, how in the world did this person get by again? How did they do it again? And you know it. So how do you grow humility? For the person who asked the question earlier, you address the unspoken insecurity. If you roll back to humility, insecurity is what underlies all of this. You have to address that. You say, oh, how do you address it? It's simple. One of the things that you can do, I personally believe this is a great way to do it, is to find ways for them to appreciate and honor other people's contributions. Put them on the spot and tell them, hey, at the next staff meeting, I'd like for you to acknowledge Jordan. I'm calling Jordan's name because it's on my screen. He's one of my staff and he's here. I want you to be the one to acknowledge Jordan for this kudos that came in. You create opportunities for them to be able to acknowledge other people and honor other people's contributions. They want all the praise. They want all of the spotlight. They'll get the spotlight because you put them on a pedestal to honor somebody else. Another way to do it is to model humility. They need to see you being what you expect. You can ask them, the people who struggle with this quality, ask them about their anxieties. Hey, are you feeling appreciated? Is there something we could better do to help you feel more appreciated? And when they get done telling you about all the ways that they want to be appreciated, then you wrap that whole thing in a package and say, well, how about we create an opportunity in staff meeting to highlight, something that somebody on the team did well, and I'd like you to be the first one to acknowledge Robert's great work. Oh, it's going to sting. But they're going to get in the habit of acknowledging that somebody else on this team is making a contribution other than just myself. Does that make sense? All right. This is the absolute last slide before we move to the question slide. This is the trifecta. This is the person who is humble, hungry, and smart. They have an adequate measure of all three. Not perfect, adequate. Leaders are not perfect. They're doing an adequate job of not being egocentric, of caring enough about the work to actually get it done and not put it off, to proactively engage other people about how they can be helpful and serve them. And then they care about people. They don't need excessive attention, but you should appreciate them anyway. But you appreciate them in ways that are meaningful to them. Everybody doesn't want to be called out on the team's thread in front of everybody or during a town hall for doing a good job. For some people, doing it in a staff meeting with the 5 or 10 people on the team is more than enough. There are other people who want their picture up at town hall and they want everybody to see it. And if you can facilitate that to make sure that people who are all three of these things get the recognition that they deserve, by all means, we should do it. They work hard, they take responsibility, they volunteer when nobody else will. And they say and do, pay very close attention to this last bullet, they say and do what's necessary to make other people feel valued, feel heard, feel included, and feel appreciated. Again, there are references here for you if you like reading books about leadership, by all means. And then there's some additional reading here for you. And now the floor is open for questions.
I have a question, Michael. So in today's day and age, there's so many different types of teams. There's a hybrid team, there's completely on site, and then there's a remote team. How can someone in a leadership position recognize those values in their team if they're not physically next to them? Like if they're working in a hybrid environment and doesn't see their team as often, or in a remote environment. Can you speak a little bit about that?
So let's start at the top. Tell them to turn their cameras on. I don't mean you all, I mean in general. Tell them to turn their cameras on. You can see immediately, as I mentioned, and I didn't know how true this was until I took the EQ class. You can see the visceral reactions that people have when that person starts talking, whoever that person is. You can see it when everybody in the room starts, oh, here we go. Wow. They're going to talk the whole meeting again today. Like, you can see it. It's right there if you're paying attention. You've got to want to see it, though. You've got to look for it. So the first order of business is turn the cameras on so you can see it. The second thing that I highly recommend, and I did this, am doing this with my own team, is we come in once a quarter and we do team building days. We schedule time intentionally to be together, even though, like, when we come to the office, everybody's working and everybody puts their head down, because even though they're part of a team, a lot of times people operate as individual contributors and the teamwork part of it comes together for a finished product. But somebody's doing one part over here, another person's doing a part over there, and you don't really get the opportunity to see people overlap, engage, interact with each other until it's too late. The third thing that I would say is ask. Again, if you're creating that environment with psychological safety where people feel comfortable to talk to you and tell you what's really going on, how they feel, what they think, you're absolutely going to find out. If you ask the question, you're going to find out. But the information informs itself. Here's what I mean by that. If you go back to humility, one of the challenges with people who are not humble is they won't speak up. So if every time I ask you, everything is fine, nothing is wrong, everything's okay, that's a pretty good indication that something is wrong and everything is not fine and everything is not okay. Even if the thing that is not fine and not okay is not about another person. So turn on your cameras, spend time together, ask. But you have to ask in the context of psychological safety. You got to build that first. I am still actively building that with my own team. Actively, every day, building it with my own team so that they're comfortable to say, hey, I'm having this challenge over here and I need help with it. Because there are people, I'm not talking about my team, I'm talking about across the organization. There are people who would rather put their heads down and struggle through it than acknowledge to their leader that they're having a challenge with something. And one of the things that I shared with my own team was, hey guys, it's okay. And I would actually prefer it if you're more comfortable to turn to your left or your right and get the answer and get help than to come up. I don't have to have the solution. I just want you to get one. And if after you all talk about it among yourselves, it's a problem that can't be resolved, then you bring it as a group. And now it's not Michael's problem because I didn't want to tell anybody I was having this challenge. Now it's a challenge that belongs to the group. I'm not singled out anymore because we talked about it among ourselves and we're all clear that we don't have a remedy.
I have a second question, if that's okay. The second question I have is, as an employee, how do you engage with a leader who doesn't have those characteristics of, caring about their employees and things like that? You mentioned about having like a psychologically safe space. And, I know some teammates, and I've experienced this myself, where we don't have that, right? Just because it's not in their nature to want to do that for their employees. So how do you as an employee navigate that?
Ask me the question one more time.
Okay. How do you engage with a leader who doesn't possess the qualities of having an emotional intelligence?
Got it.
Yeah.
I really want to say this out loud. You have to tell them.
Mm-hmm.
There's no other way around it. You have to tell them. You have to take responsibility for addressing it head on, and you have to lead up.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of people for whom that will be very uncomfortable, but you have to do it. You cannot avoid taking personal responsibility for having the tough conversation. CORE also has a class called Crucial Conversations that I recommend for anyone that struggles with having difficult conversations with people. The reason that I pause is because I'm a very, very direct person. I'm very black and white. I'm not afraid to say what's on my mind, and sometimes it gets me in trouble, and sometimes it works out well. But there are ways to be supported in developing those skills if you do not have them, to have difficult conversations, to address things in a very direct way. But especially if what's happening is having a negative impact on you personally, you have to take responsibility for bubbling that up. and making sure that your leader knows that you're being impacted by something that they're doing. I have personally, and I'm certain I'm not the only one, I've had to find out in other ways that things I was doing have negatively impacted other people. And it's very, very difficult to do when somebody could have come and said to you, hey, listen, when you say things like this, it affects me. I feel a certain type of way about it. I'm uncomfortable and that sort of thing. And as was the case in the example I gave earlier, it doesn't matter what you meant. It doesn't matter what was on your mind when you said it, when you did it. It really has to be about the recipient and the person on the other end of it. And a good leader will receive that feedback. My own, I'll be honest, I don't even know if he's on here. I don't think so. But my own leader has said to me, hey, thank you for giving me that feedback. I didn't realize that I was doing that. And if I ever put you in a position where you feel like I'm being condescending to you, or I'm doing this, or I'm doing that, by all means, let me know. I'm not saying he was being condescending to me. I'm using that as an example. Whatever it is, we were talking the other day because somebody was being recognized about something, and he felt like other people should have been included in the recognition too. And he sent me a message and said, hey, in the future, I noticed that this thing was going on. And in the future, because you manage a team under me, if I ever make you feel like you're not being appreciated for the work that's being done by your team, if somebody heaps the praise on me, by all means, let me know. A good leader will solicit that kind of feedback, but they'll also receive it when it comes sideways.
Thank you. There's a question in the chat. It says, can you share some strategies for recognizing those on your team who value gifts as gratitude? It has been a bit tricky navigating UC policy and perceived favoritism.
You know, there was a time when we could go on the health system side, we could go to HR and Wilshire Center and we could get gifts for our teams. And it had all kind of stuff like UCLA branded stuff and that sort of thing. And I've gone in there in the last maybe 6 months and I can't find the person who is actually responsible for that. So if anybody knows who that person is, please let us know, help us chase it down. Maybe we need to bubble that up to the AMG president and find out who that person is and how to contact them, especially because people are working from home. It's very difficult to get in touch with the people who have access to the gifts, because UCLA has gifts for staff that managers can go into the office and pick up and distribute to their staff. So when you have, you know, everybody comes together for all hands and that kind of stuff, they absolutely have that stuff. It still exists, according to the people that were in the office that day. I just couldn't get in touch with the person who had them, and I don't think anybody was really sure about who that was. But those things absolutely exist. On the other part, I recommend that you talk to your HR people, because I don't want to be responsible for answering what to do about real gifts outside of the UCLA branded stuff.
Okay, the next question is there a roadmap for those of us who want to become a future leader within our organization?
Yes, I highly recommend that you use the UC managed run management development programs. They absolutely exist. I've been through them. And not just as a consumer of them, as a person who was in management and even before I got into management at UCLA, but as a person with a management degree and a leadership degree, I can tell you that they are really, really good programs. They are very good programs. They do not require a tremendous amount of time away from work. The time in class is like 1 day a month over several months to get through the material. So it's not a huge time commitment. The cost is negligible. And if your organization cares about building future leaders, they will absolutely spend the money to send you to those programs. I highly recommend that you do it. I also recommend that you start talking to your manager about them now. Don't wait until they open. Don't wait until the applications come up, because by the time that happens, other people have already gotten the application. They've already filled it out. They've already got it signed because maybe they missed the last time and they've been waiting on it to come open again. Just like I'm telling you to do right now. Don't wait. Go online, do the research, get the information, know when it comes up, so that when it comes up, you have the ability to have that conversation. Hey, I'm ready. It's time now for enrollment for the management development program. They're very good programs to go through. Core has really good programs to go through. And then LinkedIn Learning has really good management development training tracks with multiple classes along the way.
Thank you, Michael. I want to see if there are any other last minute questions that we haven't answered. We do have a couple minutes left. Okay, we talked a lot about hunger. Got me hungry. And have lunch. Really good presentation.
I'm with you, Arif. I'm starving sitting here.
Yeah.
All right. Someone put the name in the chat, by the way. Oh, I'll put it in there because it was sent to me as a private message. About the gifts, who to talk to. And now it all makes sense because they told me her name was Annalisa with an S, not Liza. That helps. Thank you. I appreciate it. Because I sure, for those of you who are on the call that are my staff, I absolutely went into the office just to try to get you guys gifts before our next team building, and it didn't work out.
Thank you for that. And thank you, Michael, for a really great presentation. And, you know, I will basically be sending out the recording on our website. And also, if you can share the slides, Michael, we can also distribute that. I know that there's a lot of really great resources for further readings. And someone also recommended a book in the chat called Crucial Conversation Tools, Talking Stakes. So if you guys are interested, we can also provide those on our website. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us, and a big thank you, especially to Michael.